Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of our U.S. EPA E-Manifest Advisory Board public meeting. My name is Fred Jenkins, and I am the designated federal officer of the E-Manifest Advisory Board. I just going to briefly give an overview of today. So day 1 was EPA presentations to the board. Day 2 started the public comment period. The public comment period also ended on day 2. And also towards the end of day 2, the advisory board started their open deliberation on the charge questions, discussions, and providing the agency on advice answering the charge questions. And so now we are on the final day, day 3, where the board will continue to respond to the agency's charge questions for this meeting. So with that said, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Carolyn Hoskinson, the Director of the Office of Resource Conservation and Recovery and Delegated Chair of the E-Manifest Advisory Board. And Carolyn, if you can just do a quick roll call on the board, that'd be great. Thanks so much.
Sounds great. Well, welcome everyone to day 3 of the meeting. Yesterday we had some really worthwhile conversation and some great comments. Very much appreciated the comments from our public commenters as well as from our board members. Looking forward to continuing the discussion today. So with that, I will ask our board members to introduce themselves, starting with Terry. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Terry Baer. I'm the manager for the Solid and Hazardous Waste Program at the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Here on the board as a state representative. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Tom Baker. I'm the Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety for Veolia, and I'm on the board as an industry representative. Good morning.
Morning, Joshua Berman with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, environmental specialist senior. Minnesota's been working with EPA and the E-Manifest program for about the past 16 years and bringing that experience to the board as a state representative. Thank you.
Good morning, Mike Hurley. I am with Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, and I'm here as a state representative.
Good morning, Tevfik Kosar. I'm a professor of computer science and engineering at the University of Buffalo. I'm also serving as a program director at the National Science Foundation, and I am here as an expert IT member of the board. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Jill Mayshak. I am one of the industry reps. I am with Xcel Energy, a electric and gas utility headquartered out of Minneapolis. I manage our hazardous waste facility and bring experience in the generator, transporter, and receiving facility perspective, and look forward to the last day of getting to describe some of the information pertaining to the problem statement. So thank you so much for having us.
Hi, I'm Cindy Walzak. I'm a project manager with MPS Group, which is a total waste management services company, and I'm a representative for the industry sector.
Thank you, everyone. Fred, are you going to set up our next agenda item?
Yes. So I'm going to ask Frank, can you bring the slides back up to where we left off on the yesterday? Yes, perfect. Thank you. And so can you go to the next slide after that one? Thanks.
All right, well, let me read to us the charge question number 2 on the proposed FY 22-23 user fees. The question is, what does the board think about EPA's projections for manifest volumes and types for the FY 22-23 user fee period, and should the agency consider any adjustments? And with that, I think our lead discussant is Terry Baer.
Thanks, Carolyn. So with regards to the manifest volumes and types that was in the white paper, I believe the types are adequate. I don't have any real questions on the types, especially with the projection the EPA is trying to achieve with removing the paper manifest itself. Overall, I do think the estimated volumes are very optimistic. In the white paper, there was talk about the original estimations being very high at the launch of eManifest. And my only concern is that I think the projections that you're looking for, they may be high as well, and so that may throw the fees off. You do have the buffer of the, I believe it was 1.3 million. But as you heard from kind of the public comments, there was concerns about that amount of a buffer. The reason that I wanted to bring this up is that when you look at the reduction between 19 and 20 in the white paper, there's about 11% reduction. Obviously, we know that COVID has had a vast impact on everything that the United States has done, especially when it comes to our generators, particularly probably more the mom and pop, the small quantity generators. And I believe in the first day presentations, you mentioned that you actually saw a number about 17%, but I think that includes the December and January numbers that were not part of the white paper. So looking at that, and in addition, the mention in the white paper was about the deregulatory nature of some of the rules, from aerosols as a universal waste, DSW, the airbug rule, the pharmaceutical rule. Arizona is one of those states that's already adopted all those. And we did anticipate that we're going to see about a 15 to 19% reduction in our generators and registration this year. Now we're moving into that cycle right now. So those are still the estimates. We don't have actuals, but I think as other states work to move through that rule process, that those are other things that need to be considered. And with that, I will turn it over to the next associate discussant, Mr. Baker.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, I agree with your comments. I don't see the universe of hazardous waste expanding at all. Certainly with new regulations being passed are mostly deregulatory in nature with respect to the need to use a manifest. So I think that is going to see a steady decline in the years to come. There was a good comment yesterday or the day before regarding Illinois, which could significantly impact the number of manifests generated from that state. So all in all, I think any projections EPA has need to take into consideration a steady decline. Nothing dramatic, but certainly not an expansion. Thank you.
All right, our next discussant is Joshua Berman.
Thank you, Carolyn. Along with Mr. Baer's comments, I absolutely concur with what he said. No need to repeat. But I absolutely not just concur, but actually substantiate those. In addition, yesterday's discussion where EPA staff mentioned, actually I apologize, it was Tuesday's discussion where EPA staff mentioned input from the states on this question, caused me to basically question my own memory. And so I went back and dug through the email archives. I would assume that the questions or inquiries sent to states, other states, mirrored or were pretty close to what was sent to my state. And pulling up that actual inquiry email, which was back in September of 2020, I have concerns over the reliability of the responses that EPA got back from states based on how the question was phrased. And I'll be quite honest, even though I'm a member of this board and have been working with EPA for many years on eManifest issues, I was the staff that responded to the inquiry email from EPA on the question of do you see any changes? And I'm paraphrasing here deliberately. Do you see any changes in your state that would affect manifest volumes or manifest numbers? That was clearly the intent, and that's clearly how EPA understood that it was asking the question. But the actual question that was asked, at least at Minnesota, and this came out on a regional basis, so it appears that EPA headquarters may have passed that request on to the EPA regions to then ask their member states. And I'm not sure if the request by the region was forwarded verbatim from the eManifest headquarters team, or whether it got paraphrased and maybe different in each region. But at least in my region, the question Minnesota got asked was, does your state, let's see, do you have any potential rule changes in your state that would affect do you have any plans in the next 3 years to adjust manifest requirements that would significantly increase or decrease volumes of manifest submitted to EPA? I'm going to repeat that again because I stumbled in reading it. Do you have plans in the next 3 years to adjust manifest requirements that would significantly increase or decrease volumes of manifest submitted to EPA? Minnesota responded, no, we're not changing manifest requirements at all. We are, as other states have, we are adopting federal changes in waste status that could significantly change numbers of manifests or volumes of manifested waste for some industry segments. The two biggest, Bear already pointed out, being aerosol can universal waste adoption and pharmaceutical waste, where pharmaceutical waste has the potential to impact a large number of facilities as just as equally as the aerosol cans I mentioned yesterday. And the phrasing of that question to Minnesota suggests that other regions might have asked the question in a way to their member states that may not have been extremely clear. The EPA was looking at not so much manifesting changes, but in waste designation or waste status changes. If I would have thought through, and I apologize to EPA and the eManifest team, if I would have thought through the question that Minnesota received from its regional rep further and said, oh, we've got an eManifest board member meeting coming up probably in the next few months because we haven't had one for a while, and they're probably looking to consider where, oh, well, maybe they're asking this. I didn't. I answered it facially and said, nope, Minnesota doesn't have any intended changes for manifest requirements. Minnesota would have answered differently, and I wonder if other states would have answered differently as well. I therefore believe that EPA's projected estimates for manifest volumes may very well be high, because I think at least those two changes, which are being adopted by most states, again, aerosol cans and pharmaceutical waste management changes, may have a measurable or even minorly significant reduction in numbers of manifests. Particularly with regard to the pharmaceuticals, the volume of waste is extremely low. Instead of tons or even kilograms, pharmaceutical wastes are commonly accounted for in grams, but the number of manifests is potentially not small. I don't want to use the word large, but it's not small overall. Other than that concern, and other than a recommendation that EPA perhaps reconsider those estimates just based on its own adoption of these two rules, I do not have any further concerns with EPA's projections at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffy Kosar.
Thank you, Caroline. Tevfik Kosar. I agree with the previous board members that the current projections are a little optimistic. When we look at the historical patterns, they clearly show that the numbers have been slightly decreasing every year, and that needs to be taken into consideration when projecting the future numbers, that's for sure. In terms of the types of the manifest, the three types after eliminating the paper-only copy, as well as the projected volume distributions in terms of the percentages for these manifest types seem to be reasonable unless EPA takes more aggressive actions in promoting and incentivizing the electronic manifest. So the electronic manifest adoption rate has been around 0.3% for the last 2 years, and the projection is 0.5%. Which is reasonable since we don't really see much increase over the last several years. But I personally, I think EPA should definitely take more aggressive actions in terms of promoting and incentivizing the electronic manifests. And I will be touching on this in my response to the next question. So I just leave it here for now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next is Jill Mashok.
Hey, Carolyn. Jill Mashok. Yeah, as for the numbers, I'm going to leave it to the agency board members in terms of them. I think they have a much better handle on it. It looked like what was taken is just kind of the average over the last 2 years and then projecting that out. So whether that's a little bit high or not, it very well may be. I think in light of the information we've heard over the last couple of days with the Illinois no longer requiring the use of the Uniform Hazardous Waste Manifest and now allowing an functionally equivalent document, that particularly, I think that EPA should take a look at the waste, either that is Illinois or may have either come or go to Illinois on a Uniform Hazardous Waste Manifest and see what kind of impacts there are. We've already talked about the aerosols and some of the other types of waste. So I think it's definitely worth a second look in terms of those projections. In terms of percentages, the only thing I was going to say is particularly, I actually was relieved to see that EPA didn't have an aggressive projected estimate for the electronic manifest submittal for 22 and 23, because I really don't think, based on historical information, there's just going to be this huge jump, at least not in the next 2 years. I think it's going to still be the developmental phase. So I think that the 0.5 is definitely reasonable. I think the numbers, but even in order to get to that, I think it's going to take what we talked about in the last few days is those working on the integration efforts for the systems to be able to pull and push the data back and forth. And then we should be able to, hopefully see some increases. But I also wonder if, I believe I pulled up the January 2021, I believe, webinar. I think it was from there. And it talked about, the webinar slide showed an increase to 0.4% as of January 26, 2021. And that was specific to year 2021 activity. And that may be, that jump may be to the quick signature. I'm not sure that there's much else at this point that it would be due to, but I think making it a little bit easier on all the users to be able to sign manifests certainly will help. However, we still need to be able to work on that piece of getting the systems to talk to be able to use the full electronic. The rest of the projections for the image and image plus data, I do also agree that they appear to be reasonable. So, and then I'll save the rest for the next section. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me ask now, are there other board members that have additional comments on this question? Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, I just wanted to add, I didn't comment initially on the type of manifest, the breakdown of type, which is part of this question. So I do think EPA's estimation of the type is appropriate. I think we're going to see hopefully a movement from paper manifest that gets eliminated into the image, and some image manifest being pushed into the data plus image. I think that's going to be the natural progression. So I think the estimates are fine the way they are by type. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Not seeing any hands raised. So let me ask if EPA has any questions about the feedback that was provided.
Yes, this is Steve Donnelly. We do have a clarifying question. Yeah, we presented a likely case scenario, and in developing your response to this, did the board consider any worst case scenarios with a drastic drop in the manifest universe from, when we had COVID or any other sort of black swan events that could drastically sort of decrease the amount of manifests coming in?
Joshua Berman has his hand up.
Thank you, Carolyn. Mr. Donnelly, I think, as you're probably aware, many of us would be very hesitant to try to predict the effect of catastrophic events, particularly those that are unforeseen. However, what I can speak to is, in the state of Minnesota's experience, even temporary catastrophic events have appeared to have a relatively short impact on hazardous waste management, hazardous waste generation, and therefore we would, without digging deep into our historical manifest data, but I can very quickly look at generation data. We typically have seen a relatively short change or short-term change in hazardous waste generation volume overall on average. Certainly certain regions, or in the case of some things, industries may be affected more than others, but a lot of the manufacturing processes that generate hazardous waste are fairly entrenched in the long term. Just as an example, a major storm can, even in Minnesota, very far removed from the Gulf Coast, but here we have winter storms, and a major storm can, for instance, take down a refinery or a petroleum refinery, which generates very, very large volumes of hazardous waste, or localized events can affect. But overall, we typically don't see sudden major changes to hazardous waste generation volume that are extremely long term. Again, however, that's based on not completely overwhelmingly catastrophic situations. If a major astronomical event, such as something really big falling from the sky, hit a major part of the country, obviously I think it would be impossible for us to predict the impact, and I'm not even going to try and go there. But I don't think, based on Minnesota's experience with hazardous waste generation volume, that less than completely catastrophic events, and I would term a pandemic as a major catastrophic event, that it's just not really possible to predict on this level. But less than those events, I would say our historical data suggests that they are not something that is to be feared with terms of major changes in manifest numbers. Sorry, that kind of tailed off. I know that's not a great answer, but I don't know if there's a really great answer to your clarification question. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Tom Baker.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's a good question, Steve. And I think we just had our catastrophic event, or we're in it right now with, a 1-year pandemic. So, as in our industry and our company's experience, with the pandemic was, since we're essential services and many of the manufacturing facilities were also deemed essential in many regards, we didn't see a big drop off in manifest handling at all in 2020. With the exception, I think, in the early parts of the pandemic in the Northeast, where there was more of a complete shutdown in the early months in spring, we did see a drop off, but I think that recovered pretty quickly into the second quarter. So I think the short answer to the question is I don't know that considering a catastrophic event impact on manifest is necessary at this point. I think things like a recession could decrease waste generation volumes and would do so. Doesn't always translate though into manifest reduction. Volume of waste managed isn't always a direct correlation to the number of manifests that we submit. So I think we're fine with our estimates.
Thank you, Tom. Any other members of the board have any further comment? Does EPA have any further clarifying questions?
No further clarifying questions. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Fred, do we want to move on to 2B?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. So B, the question is, what is the board's opinion about EPA's inputs to the user fee formula, especially with respect to how the agency estimated unknowns? And Michael Hurley is going to lead us off on this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's okay. I think it's okay how this has been put together, and I'll expand on that. If you're looking at unknowns, and I think what is exactly we were just discussing in 2A is, the e-manifest is it's rounding the corner on its 3rd year. First year is a rollout year. The second year has been sort of massively impacted by a global pandemic. I don't think there could possibly be more unknowns than there are at this point, right? And then also we've got all of the deregulatory rules that are out on the street that are being adopted at various paces across the country. So I think it's really difficult to quantify. I mean, you can't quantify an unknown, but there's so many, and I think the way this has been put together is okay, because I think that the next couple of years are going to be kind of transformative in all of this. Manifest numbers should be going down a bit, for sure, right? As all the rules go forward. And I'm not sure what else you could really do. There is, of course, the buffer, whether it'll be needed or not, whether it'll just roll back into general funds or be released. I don't really know what else to say about this. I just think that the facts on the ground, everything's in motion right now, and I think you guys have done the best you probably could, and maybe some of the other discussants will have some more insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Tavik Kosar.
Thank you, Carolyn. So overall, I agree the schedule, the formula for the fees, it makes sense in the long term. But in the short term, and especially for the next couple of years, which I think is crucial for the adaptation of the electronic manifests, we need additional incentive for the electronic manifests. And I will elaborate on that a little bit. So when we look at the numbers, we see that the adoption rate of the electronic manifest has been almost flat over the last couple of years, which I keep repeating this since I think this is really important. And if you don't really take any aggressive actions, we should not really expect any any big jumps, any big increases in the adoption of the electronic manifest. And the way the numbers are moving, it shows in a couple of years we can end up almost 100% adaptation of the image plus data manifest types. This is basically where the community, the industry has been moving, since I think it is much easier for them, and there is not really enough incentive for the electronic manifest. So considering the low adoption rates of the electronic manifests at this point, and considering the goal of the agency has been to reach 75% by 2022, although the agency is saying now this is being revised, but eventually the goal is to reach 100% electronic manifests. In order to achieve that, I think there needs to be fundamental changes in three areas. The first one is, of course, in the ease of use of the e-manifest system. The second one, the community engagement and outreach. And the third one is, of course, the fee schedule as an incentive. In terms of the implementation issues related to ease of use of the e-manifest system, these were discussed in detail in our last advisory board meeting. I don't know how much of these recommendations are implemented or in the process of being implemented. But I just referred to last year's advisory board meeting report for the details of how the implementation can be made easier for the community to adapt the electronic manifest system. In terms of the community engagement and outreach, I did touch on this, on the importance of this in my talk yesterday. And I did recommend that a specific budget item needs to be included for that, along with a concrete execution plan, so that the community is really informed in terms of how the fees, for example, affect them, and how different manifest types affect them, and how they can be easily switching to electronic manifest and so on. Now, the third component, the fee schedule, I think this is at least as important as the first two in being one of the ways to encourage and incentivize the adoption of the electronic manifests. So in the proposed budget, the fee schedule for image only and electronic manifests are kept the same as the previous years at the same level. And the fee for data in and image manifests is slightly reduced. And considering data and image manifests are already well adopted, this fee schedule will further incentivize data plus image manifest type. And as I said, this can lead to actually much wider adaptation of data and image. I mean, if this is the goal, then that's perfectly fine, but I don't think that's the goal of the agency. So what I recommend, and I recommend as a board member, and I would like to also hear from the other board members about that, but I would recommend to keep the fee schedules for the image only and data plus image manifests the same as last year. So basically do not decrease the fee for the data and image, but instead try to decrease the fee for the electronic manifests as much as possible. Now, as much as possible, meaning basically not necessarily following the fee formula, since the fee formula, we know what the fee formula results in, and that may be fine in the long term. In the long term, we can follow the fee formula, but we really need to look for how to incentivize the use of electronic manifest at the highest level possible. So when we redo the math, considering the fee schedule for the image only and data in image manifest do not change, I think we will see that even reducing the fees for the electronic manifest as down as $1. I am not saying we should do that, but that needs to be seriously considered by the agency. even if we reduce the fees of the electronic manifest as low as $1, we still get to the same revenue levels, since the majority of the manifests are in the data and image format, and $1 difference in the data and image format corresponds to around $3.1 million. So that's a very large number, considering the revenue from electronic manifests is only estimated around $152,000, correct? So my recommendation is to keep the fee schedule for image only and data and image manifests the same level, and reduce the electronic manifest fees to the lowest possible rate, which is reasonable by the agency. Of course, for the next 1 or 2 years, and after that period, once the community starts adapting it, the fee schedule can continue following the formula which is outlined in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tafik. Next, we have Terry Bear.
Thank you. In short, I agree with my other colleagues. I don't have anything significant to add as far as the formula itself, but I do agree with Tafik. When you look at the paper manifest, and I'm not talking about vendors that have gotten approved to do their own printing. I think like Veolia and some others, but third-party vendors that print them for marketing. Their costs range anywhere to purchase a whole box is anywhere between like 44 cents to I think as high as 82 cents a manifest. So when you look at that compared to electronic of $8 a manifest, it's significantly higher. And so that's why I said I agree with Tafik. I don't think that I'm not saying you need to get as low as that, but there's definitely too much of a gap to incentivize or encourage the migration to what your ultimate goal is. In addition, looking at the formula, as mentioned yesterday, I do think that the operational overhead is extremely high, as we already mentioned about, maybe a business analyst or something evaluation. I think would help. And then lastly, I think it would benefit the board and even industry to see maybe a video or a presentation on how the manifests are processed. So seeing the cost of the paper center, I think there's opportunity for the board to provide insight on how that process takes place. But I do think that that's a data gap that we just don't have. We see the numbers that's presented in the white paper, but not understanding what goes into that number. What does it mean? So I think that is an opportunity maybe for a future involvement to get better understanding and maybe provide insight there. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Cindy Walzak.
I would like to implement ETC's recommendation for an economic consultant to take a look at these numbers. Frankly, I'm not in a position to comment on the inputs, but with the help of an economic consultant, I think we all could be. So I don't know how we do that. And I would hope that or EPA could address how we could have an economic consultant look at the formula and in particular the inputs to the formula, and then we could go from there. I also support Tafik's suggestion that EPA consider basically taking a loss on the electronic manifest to support and bolster its use potentially, to see if that works to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. So let me ask if any of the members of the board have additional comments. We have a couple of hands raised, but I don't know if those are left over from the previous charge question.
This is Joshua Berman. I actually did leave mine up, but once again, it worked out fortuitously because I did have comments. However, I would defer first to Mr. Baker if he wants to. I would be very glad to follow Mr. Baker. Thank you.
Okay, Tom Baker.
You're too kind, Josh. So I just wanted to make one comment regarding the user fee inputs. And we talked, I think, a little bit yesterday about the O&M costs and understanding where there's an opportunity to reduce those costs in light of particularly the elimination of the paper manifest in a few months and looking at other efficiencies. So I guess the main comment really is from an inputs perspective, that O&M cost weighs heavy on the fee structure. And I think EPA needs to take a closer look at how that is calculated as an O&M cost and how it can be reduced. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And now Joshua Berman.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Mr. Baker. I like to follow him because his thoughts are so organized. They help me organize myself. I'd like to begin by being clear that I do not oppose any decision or consensus of the board to request contracting of outside accounting or economic advice. I think it's never a good thing to decline or refuse advice. However, I would like to pass a caution to my fellow board members that in this particular instance, it may be difficult to very clearly compartmentalize or pigeonhole even the administrative and development costs of eManifest because it is inescapably entangled with regulatory and even political issues such as rulemaking. The EPA eManifest staff have some latitude to adjust things like fees and how the eManifest database and portals into that database operate, but any actual regulatory changes that would change requirements, which have been discussed in this meeting, necessarily would involve rulemaking, which is not part of the eManifest system. And I don't believe, I could very well be wrong, lawyers on both sides could argue this, I don't believe that broader regulatory rulemaking was intended to be funded by the eManifest users. Because again, there's a degree of entanglement even for the rulemaking. It's very difficult to say, well, this is an eManifest related requirement versus this is a manifesting in general requirement versus this is an environmental protection requirement that is related to manifesting. There's not a bright line. A line can be drawn probably in most specific instances, but it has to be looked on a case-by-case basis, and the line's going to move around to an outside observer depending on what viewpoint one has. And I'm bringing this discussion up as a staff member at a state integrally and intimately involved with rulemaking and the reaches of that rulemaking. Rulemaking is inherently a politically charged process that takes many factors into account, and it's extremely difficult to compartmentalize it into, well, this is an ABC requirement this versus this is an XYZ requirement. In fact, you often end up with, well, this is an A/X requirement. So just that caution that it appears to me, and I may be incorrect, but it appears to me based on EPA's presentation and this board's interaction with the EPA staff over the last many meetings that the EPA staff, eManifest staff at EPA headquarters wear multiple hats, and they wear may wear them simultaneously. Everything from regulatory interpretation to consideration of rulemaking to database operation to database optimization. And that's just a caution. Again, I am not voting per se, or so to speak, against hiring or contracting with outside economic advice. I think that's always welcome, but I just caution that that advice would have to, at the very least, come from someone who understands regulatory application, rulemaking, as well as business and administrative and technology development costs. There may be a limited number of economic advisors in the country with that have the background across all those fields. Again, that was just a caution that from the outside it can look like, well, this is an incredibly expensive administrative system. Well, on the other hand, what is that administration being used for? To some extent, it may have to be used for things that are not strictly within the system itself. Enough said on that. I wanted to bring it up as just a cautionary to my other board members. Separately, in following up on Tafiq's comments, which I very much appreciate, and I agree that EPA should strongly consider pulling as strong as possible, as strong as legally allowed, on whatever economic levers it has to try to incentivize move towards e-manifest. In the comments, I believe would be better suited for the next charge question. I'll put qualifiers on that because I think that's going to go down rabbit holes for this question. However, I do say that EPA should pull the levers it has as hard as it can, but I honestly don't believe that those levers are going to be very strong or effective because of the limited impact to the end user. Manifest fees are paid ultimately by generators. I'm in almost every instance that I've seen, and again, my state does not explicitly and deliberately look at financial data at hazardous waste handlers, but because the records that the state does have purview over are very often intermingled, stapled to, scribbled on, and variously connected to the financial records, we end up looking at the financial records. So I've looked at many of them over the past few years. The difference in cost for a generator between a hard copy paper manifest, however it's handled, and a fully electronic manifest is minuscule compared to the overall cost of the bill they're getting for that hazardous waste disposal, which is what the generator, most generators, now there very definitely are very sophisticated, very large generators. I'm sure, for instance, that Ms. Mayshak has as part of her position description examination of input costs to what her employer Xcel Energy does as far as manifesting, and they may very well take that cost into account, and it may very well be a factor for them. For many generators, and I'm going to use as example the one I have previously, the mom and pop body shop. They're shipping off hazardous waste paint sludges, for instance. They're getting they may call around and call several different vendors, consultants, or actual disposal providers, and they'll get different quotes, and those quotes are typically inclusive. They don't say, hey, we're going to charge you such and such for transportation, such and such for disposal, such and such for manifesting. The initial quote they're getting is, you want to dispose of 3 drums? What's the waste? Okay, this is the service we can provide. This is our rough quote here. Many of those generators will then choose a vendor either based on past use, hey, we've always used ABC Consulting, so we're going to continue to, or just like you and I would if we're getting our car repaired, one of the factors we might call 3 different places, get quotes, and say, well, I got a cheap quote from this place, but I don't know if I trust them, so we're going to go with this middle one. you're not choosing where you get your car repaired based on a final itemized bill. You're typically making that decision based on a rough quote pre-service. Then when they get the actual service, even when they get an itemized bill, common bill for hazardous waste disposal starts in the hundreds and goes upwards easily into the thousands. A difference of $8 to $10 on a $500 bill is not going to move the needle very far. The analogy that came to my mind yesterday was EPA should have wide open eyes that small differentials in manifest fees for various types of manifest may have about as much effect as somebody using a canoe paddle and paddling on one side or the other of an oil tanker that's heading towards the coast. Could it change it? In some circumstances, yes. For the majority of the time, is it going to have a significant impact? I believe probably not. And therefore, while I believe, hey, if you're on a ship and it's headed for the coast, do anything and everything you can. There's no reason to say, well, I don't think it'll work, so we're just not going to do it at all. By all means, I absolutely support Tafiq's recommendation. Push as hard as you can on the levers you have, as hard as legally you can. But I think both EPA and the board should have open eyes that that's probably not going to move the needle very far. And there are other things that I believe the next charge question would be a better place to expound on much deeper and further. There's other things that EPA should focus on rather than spending very, very large amounts of time worrying about exactly what this fee formula or that fee formula is going to end up with, if our bigger goal is ultimate e-manifest for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Do we have any additional comments from other members of the board? Michael?
Yeah, hi. Just want to make an additional comment. In my original answer, I was thinking more along the lines of the algebraic formula and all of that. But if we're going to get into the underlying points, I wasn't sure if this was kind of more of my prepared thing for 2C. But I think one thing we really have to, considering the direction of the responses we've been having on this, is industry has voted with its feet, and 80% of industry is using image and data. And to aggressively push for full electronic when no one's looking to go to that party is maybe it's the money in the wrong place, right? So if you think about the O&M costs, I would be more for repurposing a lot of that to to me, which seems to be the obvious part, is clean up the data. Data quality should be the most important thing. As Mr. Applebach was saying yesterday, if you've got a high error rate, which we'd have to determine exactly what the percentage error rate would be, but we need this data to be as clean as possible, right? So we're 3 years in. We're at the point now where the states are using this to do program evaluations. We're using to plan inspections, all these kind of things. And let's build on those gains, right? So I would think that in the O&M costs, certainly we should probably look to get somebody in here who's really, really qualified to go through and cook those numbers up, because it's really not in my skill set. But I would say that those numbers might be accurate, because what you're going to need to do is really focus is repurpose some people's efforts to really focus on data quality, outreach to get the generators to really start using the e-manifest system to go and evaluate whether or not their records are accurate, everything's gone where they thought it would go, and all that kind of thing. And also to have them do their own corrections in their own, their own cleanup. I know it's not popular to say that the full electronic might be the dream, but I think it's the where things pretty much are. 80% is data and image. So I just wanted to put that out there. in the numbers, they might be, they're fine, I think, the way where they are. Yeah, they're a little bit high, but we're looking at cleaning up and then sort of consolidating all the gains we've made. And I think that is really the best bang for the buck. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and if anybody has any comments on that, please. Thanks.
Any comments from other members of the board? Tafiq.
I just would like to say that I respectfully disagree with Mr. Hurley on that. So 80 or 85% of the community using image plus data doesn't mean it should continue the same way. I don't have the numbers, but probably 10 years ago, 100% of the community was using paper. So it doesn't mean they were on the right direction. So I think we have a vision making everything electronic, and this is the path forward, and we just need to make sure we provide the incentives and the mechanisms and the knowledge to the community how to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments from board members? Jill.
More of a question, but obviously a lot of this has to do with 2C. So I can respond here or I can wait till 2C. I don't know where to go from that because I do have comments on the incentives and penalties and information we heard yesterday. So a lot of this I think pertains to the user fee. And so I think at this point, I'm going to reserve my comments until we get to that section.
Thank you, Jill. I was going to ask Fred a timing question. We did not have a morning break listed on the agenda, I don't think, but I'm wondering if we want to have a short morning break before we continue, Fred?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. I was just kind of thinking about that myself. So let's, if no, I guess we can, take a break now and then make sure, finish off on, make sure we're finished off on question 2B. Make sure no other board members have any other comments to make on 2B, and then we'll open it up to the agency to make sure they're clear on the board's response to 2B. So let's take a break now. Can we come back at 11:10? Is that all right with you, Carol?
Sounds good to me.
Great, thank you. So we'll see everybody at 11:10.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Welcome back from our, and I'm just going to let Carolyn take over from here. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you, Fred. So let me ask if any of our board members have any additional comments on 2B. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I will turn to EPA to ask if EPA has any clarifying questions on the comments that were made.
We do not have any clarifying questions for 2B. Thank you.
Excellent. With that, Fred, are we ready to move to 2C?
Yes, certainly.
All right. 2C. Are there other factors the board would ask EPA to consider when finalizing user fees for this period? And the lead discussant is Joshua Berman.
Thank you, Carolyn. In responding to this question, I note that as in previous board meetings, there's often been at the last charge question being essentially a open-ended or mass follow-up asking if the board has any other input, any other considerations, any other recommendations to EPA overall or generalized. This question appears limited to just the finalizing user fees. However, as Ms. Mashak suggested just a few minutes ago, I personally believe that the board has in 2B has probably given a lot of additional advice on the specifically user fees already, and I therefore would like to take this charge question the opportunity to enlarge the question and are there any other factors the board would ask EPA to consider and tail it off from there. In which case I think there are other things the EPA should consider. They do impact user fees because this is a user-funded system, so ultimately everything and anything EPA does impact user fees, but I don't think it necessarily is limited to user fees this cycle, the user fee formula, or other things. So with that view, I'd like to return to comments that Mr. Hurley made just a few minutes ago, and my concern, and Mr. Hurley can absolutely please feel free to correct me if my concern is misplaced. My concern is that yesterday he asked a question that I think was an excellent question, and today I'm concerned that his response to an earlier question might suggest that the board should go a different way than what we than the trend of discussion yesterday, which is using the analogy presented yesterday. Right now, we can view the e-manifest system and user interaction with it as a box. We're in a box, and the box holds things pretty well. It's not the greatest box to get in and out of, but it works. It holds things. we can be in it. We can sit in it, however you want to say that, and we can really work on making the box better, or we can decide whether we want to be in the box, and that is our ultimate goal, and that's where we want to stay, or whether we want to move outside the box. And if we do, how soon, how quickly, and how strongly do we want to work to do that? My viewpoint, and I would recommend that the board consider this as a potential consensus viewpoint, I hope, is that the box is good. EPA, the EPA staff have done great work to build it, and it works. And there are improvements we could and should make to the box we're in. But that's not where we want to be. That's not what the entire system was set up to be. Because if we stay where we are and we say, well, the market has spoken, 85% of manifests are hard copy manifests that the data is submitted to EPA, then what we've accomplished is setting up a post-shipment database, a records repository, effectively. And that's really nice, and it's really useful. And as a state representative, I certainly find that a very helpful tool in administering environmental protection requirements. But I don't think that was our original intent, and I don't think that circling back to Mr. Baker's comments and the comments of ETC, this entire system was set up based on the push and request of the hazardous waste management industry. It wouldn't exist if they hadn't wanted something to happen. And I don't believe, and this is where I invite lots of others to chime in and correct me, I don't believe that their goal for the time and energy that they expended, and that EPA staff has extended, and all the members of this board have extended, was to create an after-the-fact records repository. It's nice to have, it's good. I think it is not our ultimate goal. And if we recognize that, then I think that helps us guide and should help EPA guide where its priorities should be and where it should really spend the majority of its time, attention, and indeed budget. And that is on the ultimate goal of not trying to force industry into another box that's already sort of built, which industry has very clearly, the market, through the market, has indicated does not work for them, does not meet their needs, and does not reasonably foreseeably able to be tweaked to fit their needs. The idea of creation of data packages that we'll call a manifest in EPA system, starting an EPA system, being managed through the whole chain in the EPA system and finalizing the EPA system isn't working for industry, and it doesn't seem in the foreseeable future that it will work for industry. Instead, I believe, as I briefly mentioned yesterday, that EPA should really focus and devote the majority of its time and effort to how to build, because I don't believe it exists now, and maybe I misunderstand the system, but I don't believe the capacity or capability exists now to build the method, that's not a good word, but to build it possible such that an outside user, be it a broker, be it a consultant, be it a transporter, be it a generator, be it a TSDF, all equally should have access, that an outside user may assemble a package of data in their system, however they do that, however their system is built, through a common data standard, common method, common portal, then with one click, one touch, contact EPA system, upload that or make that data available to EPA system, and receive in response an acknowledgement that yes, this is now a manifest, and we'll assign it a tracking number or other unique identifiers. Your manifest now exists. And then support the continued management of that data as the actual hazardous waste shipment progresses until it reaches its final destination, when again that outside user through their system reaches out to the EPA system, contacts it and says, this shipment has finalized and here is the amended or changed parameters of that shipment, because yep, in the real world they very commonly differ from what we planned a few days ago. That would appear from my state perspective. I am not a member of the hazardous waste management business community, and so Mr. Baker, Ms. Mayshak, and others may say, well, what you're talking about, we need to change that. But I believe that's the vision of what it appears would work for industry and would or could be adopted. And that is where I believe EPA should focus its time and attention, and therefore the applied user fees, because they fund the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Are there other board members? Oh, wait a minute. Where am I? Terry Bear is next in the associate discussant.
Thanks, Carolyn. So the only thing that I want to add, and we've touched on this multiple times, that I think is kind of Mr. Berman led into, I think Tuesday, maybe it was yesterday. It all kind of runs together at this point. Garbage in, garbage out. Right now, there's a lot of the quality issues with what's going in. I know on Tuesday that you'd mentioned that you'd not considered a resubmittal fee or something of that nature to try to avoid discouraging adoption of the system. But I think if anything, the states have shown that states that have those, it becomes a necessity. So just like we would hold any generator accountable for having valid waste determinations, contingency plans, and other records, we need to make sure that we're holding those accountable that are submitting you data that is accurate. And in addition, those that are not following or complying with that, or somehow happen to be accountable for that, rather than kind of passing that around to all the industry, especially those that are doing it right in industry. So I'm not sure what a formula would look like, if that would require another rule change. But I think as you migrate into the system more, it's going to be a critical aspect. And it's just because we want to make sure that we're complying with what the intent was. When eManifest was first done, the benefits were cost savings, accurate and more timely information. I don't think we have the accurate. And so and it's just because of the data gaps that we're experiencing or seeing, at least at the state level. So so that would be the only recommendation that I had for additional factors for EPA to consider with regard to the fee period. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry. Next is Tawfiq Kosar.
Thank you, Carolyn. Tawfiq Kosar, and I would like to follow up with my recommendation from the previous question. So there is a business term, and some of you may be very familiar with this term. It is called intertemporal pricing. And what this suggests is any new product for which there is no customer trust and adaptation can be temporarily priced much lower than its optimal price in order to incentivize customer learning and inertia. So this is an area which is very well studied in the academic world. There are many academic publications on this, and it is very well adapted and practiced in the commercial world and in the industry. And it has been proven to be successful both in practice and in theory. So, so basically, what I would suggest is I would just reiterate to EPA to consider this very very seriously. And although we agree that the optimal pricing, optimal fee schedule should be different, and it can follow the formula which is recommended by EPA. It is perfectly fine to come up with a temporal low fee schedule, especially for the electronic manifest system, which will incentivize the adaptation in the short term for maybe 1 or 2 years, only to see the impact of this. So I would just reiterate that, and I would like to make sure EPA very strongly considers this option. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Jill Meshaw.
All right. So here I'm going to comment on the user fees. I was biting my tongue and I was like, okay, do I talk about it now or do I hold off? We have talked a lot about the user fees over the last few days. It was mentioned by the board members and also during the public comments. But I think it is worth repeating some of the information that's already been stated, because I might state it a little bit differently. So the receiving facilities that are incurring these charges or e-manifest fees, in many cases, and I'm not going to say all, I can only speak for myself, in many cases, and in my case, all are passing them back to the generator. Josh Berman just mentioned that. And that is true. And I think we need to take that into consideration. And even though there are different fee structures, in some cases, we're just charged the highest rate, or a lot of times even the next rate up. And I looked back at all our invoices dating back to the beginning, and you know, the first year or year and a half or whatever before the next fee structure started, you know, we were charged, and I use multiple vendors, so it's not just one. You know, you're charged one price, and then the cost, the fee structure for EPA did increase, except for electronic, actually for electronic as well. But regardless, and the fees did follow along, and typically in all cases, at least with us as a generator, they increased above and beyond the cost that EPA is charging to the receiving facility. Now, I do have a different perspective on that, and I might have a different outlook, but I am not surprised at some of those chargebacks being a little bit higher, because I do feel that there is some additional cost for uploading and data filing process that TSDF may not have dealt with previously. And there are still those learning curves. What I would caution though is when you look at decreasing prices, and I'm all for that, I don't feel as a generator, those cost savings are going to be passed on to the generator. So if it's 14 going down to 13, my thought is if I'm paying 25 right now, I'm going to still be paying 25 in the future in 2022, 23. So that's just what I've seen in other fees charged, fuel surcharges, whatever it may be. A lot of times they're tied and they increase, but they don't necessarily decrease. So I kind of bring this up because I do think we need to be careful in terms of incentives, or I'm going to call it penalties or correction fees. I agree with Tavik and the rest, and I was glad to hear that you were going there, not to increase the first two, the image only or the data plus image, but to potentially consider decreasing the fee for electronic manifests. I was thinking the same thing. There's not a whole lot of revenue being gained right now anyway from the electronic manifest. So I think potentially reducing that again, maybe back to $5, really doesn't change the outcome that much, because even EPA believes that it's only going to be 0.5% in terms of total amount of e-manifest, fully e-manifest. So I think we're good there. And the reason I bring up the word like a correction fee or penalize, again, the data could be wrong. And yesterday I brought up some instances, and in almost all those, well, actually in all the instances, it was a data plus image upload. The only errors that I did notice that came from the paper processing center were strictly just typo or fat fingers. So me as a generator, I am concerned that some of those fees could be passed on to us if there was a correction or an additional fee charged. So I agree to incentivize with the potentially lowering of the electronic cost. And then just secondly, to consider, once a fee or surcharge is added to the generator, like I said, it's for most cases, it's not going to be reduced or it's not going to be removed. And I think some of the questions are who is ultimately paying this fee? And I know Josh Berman, you brought up about the small mom and pop shops. And, I do agree, if they're getting a quote, they're going to see this information. They might not see the breakdown, but that $25 or whatever it may be, maybe they're using a smaller generator with a smaller economies of scale, and maybe they're charging $50. We don't know. That could be a big difference for them. Is it for us? No, we looked at the fees ahead of time, and it's small in comparison to, like you said, the disposal or even the transportation costs for that matter. But I just think that these they need to be considered, that, how does this impact the generators ultimately paying these fees? So whether it was right to talk about this here or right to talk about it before, I did want to kind of wait and talk about it under the user fees. With regard to Mr. Berman's comment, living outside of, moving outside of the box. When I read the white paper and when I heard the EPA's presentation, to me, that's what they want to do. I think initially it was, we're going to live in this box, but I think it was very clear that they want to, my opinion, that EPA wants to move outside the box, and because it was mentioned in their last response to our comments, well, they're not interested in just using this as a repository or using it, the data plus image as an considered fully electronic. So when Steve Donnelly described the whole process the first day, to me, when he was describing the push-pull, it was exactly what you were saying, use our EPA ID or names and, use your system. And then get the number from us. And then at some point, eventually, the information gets, added through API or whatever it may be back into EPA's system. We didn't touch on maybe the kind of the exceptions or the amendments to the manifest, but I don't know, maybe I was just in a different place, but that's kind of what I thought that we all have, maybe not all, but a lot of us or some of us have the same goal in mind. And then my last comment kind of goes, and this is where it goes not specific to the user fees. And I don't know exactly, how to state this, but we're talking about this, a consultant or somebody looking at the potential spend or the formulas or, O&M cost. So I guess I'm going to try to put it as a statement. But I think EPA's program, and I don't work for an agency, so maybe I'm wrong here, but EPA's e-manifest program should be subject to a financial audit or audit requirements by an outside party for past spend, just like other businesses. Somebody that can look at, are all the project expenditures up to date, are they reviewed to ensure fully documented, fully developed O&M spending, are they properly accounted for? And I don't know why that can't be done at some point for spend up at least through 2020. And somebody, and hopefully maybe can comment on that from the board. So that's, I think, what I want to cover. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill. Let me turn now to see if other board members have additional comments to make. Tom Baker.
Thanks, Carolyn. Just want to comment about you know, some of the conversation about fees and ultimately what drives this program and what's going to drive more electronic usage. You know, I guess my approach and my understanding of this program where we're at today is that it's not a new program. It's been around since 2018 now, so we have some good track record and understanding of how users have reacted to what EPA has provided as a e-manifest system. And to me, it's clear that what's going to move this in different directions is features and benefits of the system, not the fee structure. So I think as much as we try to tweak the fee structure and talk about you know, how we establish fees, that's fine. We have to recoup our costs and providing a revenue stream to pay for the programming changes. But ultimately, having these multiple categories to me is not necessary. I mentioned earlier that I think we could move to a two-tiered fee structure, one that's essentially a paper submittal, which is today paper, as well as image only, and then have a second category, which is electronic data, which is image plus data and fully electronic. And just simplifying the focus on the fees, I think, is something that EPA should consider. You know, again, if we develop a system that provides a better mousetrap for managing hazardous waste, getting it from point A to point B, it's going to truly reduce a burden on generators, facilities, transporters, provide cost savings. People will use it, but you know, to take a stick and try to move people in a direction using a fee structure that's $1 here, $1 there, I think that's a mistake, and it's not really going to make a big impact here. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right, Joshua Berman has his hand up.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Mr. Baker. I first wholeheartedly, completely, and absolutely support and reiterate Mr. Baker's comments. I think he said it much more succinctly than I did or could, and simply note me down as saying the same things, just as strongly or even more strongly. Following that, Mr. Baer and Mr. Hurley reminded me that I believe I inadvertently left out from my leading comment on the response to this charge question that quality control of data received is indeed paramount. If we can't trust what's in the system, then the system is pointless, and we're all wasting our time and wasting a lot of people's money. It has to be reliable. It has to be trustworthy. We have to have confidence in what we're holding in a database for the database to be of any value. Therefore, I believe I believe there's two actions that the board should recommend or advise EPA to take. One is to examine its current systems for how the data that is being entered into the e-manifest system right now is determined to be trustworthy. And again, I'm not going to rehash the whole discussion yesterday or the comments I had yesterday regarding types of errors, but EPA should examine both process errors and actual errors and establish methods to try to prevent that data from being entered into the system, because once it's in, getting it out is really hard and much more expensive. But moving forward, looking at if we can, when we reach, I'm not even going to say if, because we will, it is where I believe we want to go. When we reach the acceptance of essentially a whole manifest, just can't be called a manifest yet because it's not recognized as such until, I believe it shouldn't be recognized as such until it hits the EPA system. at the beginning or prior to a shipment initiation, in the acceptance of that data package, I believe it is important before a shipment originates to have at least preliminary checking of that data against existing records. And if there are click-arounds that, or built into the software macros or routines, that they be insulated. It should not be as easy as one, well, I don't know the ID number, so I'll just click this radio button, and now I don't have to worry about the ID number. That's a paramount piece of information. And there's other paramount pieces of information as well, or critical pieces of information. I think that needs to be hard baked into the system. EPA is either learning, or I fear, based on my state's experience, about to learn just how difficult it is to identify and root out bad data after you've accepted it. Trying to catch it before it enters a database is difficult, but much easier relatively than the following. And I wanted to take this time to just clarify in my initial response here that I wholeheartedly support Mr. Hurley's and Mr. Baer's concerns about data quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Do we have other board members who want to make additional comments? Michael Hurley?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I just would like to also say that I wholeheartedly support Tom Baker's comment there. And I just had a few bullets I just wanted to go through. So I think we have to kind of look at this and say, well, at this time, image and data is the standard. It's not the goal, but it is the standard. So we should really work with that, again, at this time. So I'm not being regressive. I'm just trying to be practical. This is what we have. Let's work with this. In data quality, again, as everyone else is saying too, it's paramount, and we should spend money on this. And we should think about too, perhaps, is a consideration that maybe a rejection cost needs to be implemented. If the PPC gets image and data and it's a mess, reject it, make them resubmit it, make them pay again. And that will lead me to the next one here, which is we really should spend some real effort and some money on doing outreach to the generators, right? Because if you look at the whole industry application, it's a whole waste management system, right? You can do your permitting, you can do your BR, you can do your manifesting. Everything's in one place. We really need to get the generators to start coming in. And I understand that many states don't regulate VSQGs, and there's always going to be manifests that don't have a real generator ID on them. Understood. But to get as many people as we can into the system to actively maintain all of their information, to go in and check for errors, because those won't get to the paper processing center, right? Because they'll have fixed them up front, right? So I think that really needs to be a next step, right? And as Tom was saying too, add value here. BRs, annual reports, the data's in there, you got it. Even things that are like monthly summaries for generators. You write it once, it'll run forever. You just click a button. It's an oversimplification, I know that. But that would be very useful for generators, right? They could run a monthly tally. They could look at what they've shipped, and they could realize, oops, that might not be correct. And those are all things we could work on. And I know there's a concern that this will become just a data repository, right? We're just getting the end of cycle data. I think EPA should really continue to reach out and to work with all of the industry sectors, whether they be brokers or software providers or the transporters, TSDs, to facilitate touch points, right? So every time the manifest is acted upon by any actor, record is a system of record, right? So e-manifest is a system of record. It's okay if you're managing this information on your phone using an app and all that. but it doesn't matter until it's posted to the system of record. So to keep on working on APIs and things like that to facilitate having this happen closer to real time than just an end of cycle thing. And this is my last point is, there was a request for an economic analyst to kind of go through the books and see if costs are apportioned correctly, adequately. I think that's probably a good idea. It's certainly not my background, and I think that's maybe something we should do. And those are my comments. Thanks.
Fantastic, thank you. Let me see. Joshua Berman's hand is up.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Mr. Hurley. I just wanted to bounce back and say it is quite possible that I might have misunderstood Mr. Hurley's intentions or the import of his comments yesterday and today. And if we were sitting in Washington, D.C. across a table from each other, I'd be smiling and nodding as he talked and communicating that, now I understand what you were meaning. So thank you for that clarification, Mr. Hurley.
Great. Tom Baker?
Yeah, thank you. One thing I wanted to add earlier, and I had forgotten, so I'm going to add it now. When we talk about the universe of manifests and the number of manifests in the future to be managed, I don't think it's been mentioned yet, but we've been discussing the upcoming proposal that will include exported waste in the e-manifest process. So can't ask a question of EPA now what that universe of exported manifest is. I think I have an idea from my company's perspective. It's not insignificant by no means. So I don't know if it's going to hit the fiscal year 2022-23. My hunch is it's probably not, but certainly needs to be factored in for the next cycle, and what impact those exported manifests will have on the total numbers. Thank you.
I can't tell if Joshua Berman's hand is still up or if that's left over.
Sorry, re-raised it quickly. This is Joshua Berman. Sorry about that. There's always a difficulty, especially at the tail of these meetings, between trying to focus attention and make very clear the major points and important thoughts, and conversely making small, detailed, or minor thoughts and making sure that they're said and in the record, but in doing so not wanting to distract from the major things. It's easy to lose the big picture if we start counting trees, but if we don't count the trees at some point, we don't know how many there are. So I had a few additional comments at the very tail end here, but I don't want them to distract from the very big pictures we're talking about. And one of those was looking at overall trends. I know that they have recently become far more familiar than they used to be or were, because they had no reason to be before. The eManifest headquarters team with PCBs and the PCB regulations, because it is its own little compartmented weird universe. Miss Mayshak, if we were at a table, she'd probably hopefully be smiling and nodding and smiling in humor. But something that logically they probably know, but they may not have the direct experience with to sort of keep in the back of their heads unconsciously. It's a small number. The number of PCB manifests in my state, and I would extrapolate nationwide, compared to normal, air quotes, hazardous waste is small. It's a real number, but it's small. But in terms of trends, the number of PCB manifests continues in my state, and again, I believe would extrapolate reasonably nationwide, to precipitously go down. As part of my other duties. I perform inspections of specific PCB facilities and generators, and many generators in my state that 5 years ago had 6 to 12 shipments a year are now shipping 1 to 2 shipments a year, and those will probably drop off to near zero within the next 2 to 3 years for many facilities. It's a quickly self-extinguishing waste stream in many instances. They're still going to exist at some point somewhere in some volumes, but the number of manifests being created is going down. And I don't have hard numbers. I apologize to EPA. Minnesota's data doesn't quite allow parsing that for that end result, but the proportion of PCB manifest is very small, and I don't know how much that's going to move the needle in terms of overall numbers. But I bring it up here as a minor point at the very end to just suggest to the EPA, if they have somebody from the TSCA program who can weigh in, to touch base with them, because it may help make sure that the EPA's estimated manifest numbers, which drive all the budget forecasts and the fees and everything else, take that into account. It may not affect anything, but it is going down, and it's going down quickly, and it has the potential to possibly make EPA's projections, if they haven't taken that into account, over-optimistic in terms of numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Any other board members have any additional comments to make? I am not seeing any hands being raised. I will ask EPA if you have any clarifying questions.
We do not have any clarifying questions. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you so much. So Fred, I'll ask you a timing question. We are 8 minutes away from when we were supposed to take a lunch break. How do you want to manage our time?
So let's ask everyone to bear with us, because we're basically going to close the meeting out at this point. So we're going to start to encroach upon a little bit of lunchtime, but after this, you'll be done for the day. So we'll be getting out half a day early. So let's proceed with asking each of the board members to go around. I'll say the table. Normally, if we were meeting in person, we'd be around the table. But ask the board members to go around in alphabetical order and provide their any closing remarks as we come to a close of this meeting.
Sounds great. So starting with Terry Bear, and then we'll go in the same order that you introduced yourselves each morning.
Thanks, Carolyn. I don't have anything additional to add. I agree with Mr. Baker when he said about, the benefits. I think we continue to hear that the DOT manifest requirement is a blocker. So finding a solution to that could purposely be a benefit, but that'd be the only thing addition that I wanted to add. Thank you.
Tom Baker.
Okay. First, I just wanted to thank EPA for putting on this session in the last 3 days. I think a lot of effort went into it, as I know, and I really appreciate it. And I certainly appreciate, Steve, your efforts in coming back with information on short notice based on our requests on the first day. It was very helpful to get that additional data. So thanks again. I think it was one of the best meetings I think I've participated in, and I've been through them all so far. So I think a lot of good transparency with what EPA has provided on the budget, how the fees are being established. I think that's what we were expecting, quite frankly, in the past, and I'm glad we're at this point today. So again, nothing but nice things to say about EPA and their efforts to get this meeting scheduled. And I do hope that the next one is scheduled in person so we can do a bit more interaction with the EPA and the board members directly. But thanks again.
Tom, let's hope for lots and lots of reasons that by the next time we plan to get together, people can see each other in person again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Joshua Berman.
Thank you, Carolyn. I effectively, I think, used the charge question 2C as my wrap up. So I don't have anything significant to add to that. I also extend my thanks to EPA, to the other board members, and to the public commenters for certainly sparking thoughts and discussion, which may lead to different advice from the board that it might have given without those public comments. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Michael Hurley.
Sure. I kind of use 2C for my wrap up as well. You know, full disclosure. I just want to say thank you to EPA for having this, and thank you to the e-manifest team for their outstanding work on this. And I look forward to seeing you in person sometime in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Tafiq Kozar.
Thank you, Carolyn and Tafiq Kozar. I would like to start with thanking EPA staff for the very well organized and informative presentations and for the white paper that they have prepared. It really helped. And also would like to thank all of the board members for the very insightful comments during the last 3 days. I would like to make a recommendation in terms of the process in which the board makes recommendations and how EPA responds or implements those recommendations. Since this is my 3rd year in the advisory board, and we make our recommendations during the board meetings, and a couple of months after the board recommendations, we finalize our reports and present it to EPA. But as far as I know, there is no formal mechanism which is in place. After we submit our final report, we don't really know what happens after that. So basically, does EPA implement all of our recommendations or part of them or none of them? We don't really know. As far as I know, basically, there is no formal mechanism in which we are informed how our recommendations are actually impact EPA's implementation. I would suggest to include such a mechanism. It can be maybe in terms of a written report after 1 year, or it can be maybe a short presentation at the next board meeting, basically just going over, this was our initial plan, and after the recommendations of the board, this is how it changed. I think that would be quite useful. And I also join the other board members in their wish to have the next meeting in person, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jill Meshach.
Thank you, Carolyn. Just really quick, kind of from yesterday, my focus is on the integration. EPA working with the key stakeholder members, data quality, continuing to increase the integrity of the data, and also system functionality enhancements, and continuing to build out that system and make enhancements, which gets me to my next point. On behalf of our company, I would like to extend my thank you to EPA system development team and anybody that was participated or involved with the quick signature. That has saved a lot of time, and I cannot thank you enough on all the positive comments that I get at our company, from our internal generators down to all our drivers who no longer can remember or don't have to remember their challenge questions, to even the initial signatures at the receiving facility. So it has been a blessing. I thank you for implementing that, and I want to, kudos and hats off to everybody on the EPA team that participated in that development. And then also thank you to board members, Fred and Carolyn, yourself. And it's been a pleasure meeting you and working with all of you this year.
Thank you, Jill. Cindy Walzak.
Thank you again to EPA for the excellent presentation. And I've got nothing to add. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So I will add that I appreciate the efforts of the board so very much, and all of your really thoughtful comments on all of the questions that were posed. Really, really appreciate all the work that you put into this. And I don't know that I've ever in one place heard EPA thanked by so many people. So that's always a wonderful thing. And that says something about the hard work of the EPA staff who work on eManifest. So I will add my appreciation to our own EPA staff for all their hard work to be transparent and inclusive and cooperative with all the various stakeholders in the eManifest world. So thank you to the EPA staff and to the board. And with that, Fred, I think we are ready to close.
Yes, I'm sorry. My mouse wasn't working. I was trying to turn my mic off.
You don't want the meeting to end, I know.
Huh?
You don't want the meeting to end.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. But so first off, before I make my closing remarks, I'm going to turn really quickly to the agency to give them an opportunity to provide any closing remarks. That's a tradition we do. So I'm going to turn to, do we have a spokesperson for the agency to provide closing remarks?
It looks like Sonia is having some trouble with mics. You can pop in anytime, but yes, speaking from my role in ORCR, I want to thank the public commenters. I want to thank the people who helped make this meeting happen, contractors, staff, of course, the EPA eManifest team, as well as our partners in the agency, the states, and most of all, thanks to the board for their deliberations. This was a really productive meeting, and we appreciate all the input, and we're looking forward to receiving the meeting minutes.
Okay, thank you, Steve, so much. And so in closing, I want to say thank you so much. As always, thank you so much, everyone, for all your hard work to produce another very successful eManifest Advisory Board public meeting. A big, huge thank you to Carolyn Hoskinson for your leadership as the delegated chair of the eManifest Advisory Board, especially considering this is your first meeting. But I must say, I think you're natural, and it's a pleasure to work for you. Thank you to the board. As always, you all did a fantastic job. You always come robustly prepared, and your participation is really excellent, intense, and you're very flexible in working with me and preparing for the meeting. And so on behalf of the agency, thank you for your tremendous service on this board. Special thanks to Barry Breen, the acting assistant administrator of the Office of Land and Emergency Management, for his support in this meeting. Thank you so much, Barry, also for participating in this meeting. And as always, a big thank you to the Office of Land and Emergency Management Immediate Office. Thanks so much for all your support. And thank you to the ORCR eManifest team and senior leadership, including Sonia Sasseville, the Director of Program Implementation and Information Division. Also special thanks to, and I hope she hears me, hope she's still on, Mimi Garnica, who's now retired. She was involved and instrumental in helping us to prepare for this meeting before she retired. So, hey, Mimi, I know you registered for the meeting. So, so there's a shout out to you. Thanks so much. And thank you so much to my supervisor, Amanda Kohler. Thank you to Steve Donnelly, eManifest Program Manager, David Graham, Scott Christian, Brian Gross, Dave Nicholas, who represents OMIO. And thank you to all our eManifest team members and EPA staff that were involved in supporting this meeting. Thank you so much. And also, thank you very much to all of our public commenters for their participation. And thank you to all those who attended this meeting virtually. And thank you to our contractors in support of this meeting. The meeting report will be completed no later than 30 days after the close of this meeting. The meeting report will consist of the recommendations that the agency, that the E-Manifest Advisory Board provided and discussed during this meeting. The advisory board essentially writes the report. My role is just to facilitate the write-up of the report. The agency will review the final recommendations and advice and report, and some time after, the agency will provide a formal response to the report. And just for clarity's sake, the agency, EPA, always provides a formal response to E-Manifest Advisory Board reports. We have formally responded to the board recommendations after every meeting, and that formal response is in the public docket for all our past meetings, and it'll be in this public docket once that response is completed. The last note I want to make is I'm going to ask the entire advisory board to meet me very briefly for a very brief admin meeting right after this meeting closes. I'll send you an invite. You'll see us through Microsoft Teams that we'll meet very briefly, and I'll give you a few minutes before we meet when I send that invite. So please join in. And so, last note, this meeting is officially adjourned. Everyone have a wonderful upcoming weekend, and please stay safe. Have a very nice evening. This is Fred Jenkins. We're closing out. Thanks so much.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Fred.
Thank you.